Alrighty, this is a 2004 R6, and today we're going to be doing new handlebar grips and new throttle cables. As you can see, both of mine are worn pretty bad. Look how old and nasty that is. Look at these grip donuts too. I mean, that is begging to be replaced. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Because I have handlebar mirrors, they're going to sit like that, which means that on these new grips, I won't be able to keep this little part right here, this little end. So we're going to take a razor and we're going to finally cut as smartly and as neatly as we can around that little seam. But before we do that, we're going to take a razor blade, just go ahead and cut these old grips off. So I've just got my razor blade, I'm just going to cut right through it, just like that. Perfect. And again, I don't care about these, they're old and they're very damaged and very weathered. Alright, here you go. Very neatly, without damaging or indenting that throttle tube, which it looks like somebody else has already done anyway. Chuck that, don't need that anymore. So this is your throttle tube. You can see that operating in there. So next what we're going to do is we're going to come in here, we're going to undo this bolt back in here and this screw right here. And we're going to take the cables off, which come around to the throttle assembly right here. So we're going to go ahead, get all this unhooked and everything, get the new throttle cables out, and go about reinstalling everything. All right, so I've got the kill switch assembly apart. Now you can see the little housing for the throttle tube and throttle assembly. Okay, so since I've already undone the cables down here, that little bracket would ideally sit up there and be held in by a screw, but I've already undone it. So we're going to take the slack out of the throttle cables in the throttle assembly down here in just a moment, and that'll give us slack to take this entire thing off. We're going to clean this out a little bit, and we're going to put the new cable. Here's the inside of your ignition switch, your kill switch. You got to take those two little prongs off of the brake lever right there, and make your work much easier. Then you use a pair of pliers to very carefully manipulate these out of the way. And you remember that this one is on the top and this one is at the bottom. Now what we're going to do is take these puppies back, feed them back around. I'm not worried about breaking them because they're going to get replaced. Okay, so now our throttle cable is much more loose. As usual, take more apart than I ever think. Typical, especially with used bikes. Anyway, the wretched things are out. They're gone. What I ended up having to do was I just took the whole airbox out and came down from above. You can see that little assembly right. Let's see if I can get my pinky in there to a point. Right there, that little gold fork. Well, there's one on both ends, top and bottom, and the throttle cables sit in there and they bolt down so that the cables don't move. You can adjust the tension, you know, whatnot and so forth, so that you don't have any loose wires, loose cables on that throttle pulley right there. Anyway, that was a pain. I had to just get a wrench on it from above, and to do that I had to take all that off. So that's what you do, and the little assembly that I'm talking about is right there, that right there. So you can actually adjust this. Say it's too tight, I can adjust it that way, and that little fork will sit there, and it'll have a little bit more slack. Or I can adjust it backwards, and it'll have less slack. There you go. So, useful. Start in reverse. We're going to go ahead and clean out the old throttle tube. Look how disgusting that is. That is nasty. All that dirt and grime is going to prevent you from having a smooth throttle. That's no fun. And quite frankly, it'd be laziness to not see the new throttle lead, cable lead is in. Well, mostly in. Still got to connect it to the throttle pulley. So, to get this in, basically I kept the top off, you know, the airbox and all that, and you feed it down in there, and you hand tighten it to the point where these little forks start to grab that little bolt. Now, once those forks grab that little bolt, you can't move that bolt anymore. So you have to get a little wrench around this end. You can see I'm tightening it a little bit. I don't think you need it terribly 100% tight. I'm doing it to a little bit more than hand tight. You don't want to strip that thread as they look aluminum. That doesn't sound like a good time. So that's done, that's in. And the way you eliminate slack, unlike the other line, you eliminate slack with these right here. On this line, you have the other end right here. So this is how you would eliminate your slack in your other line. Okay, so you will undo this little wheel right there and adjust that up or down based on slack, tension, you know, whatever you want, more slack, less slack, whatever. So now we're going to carefully install this around that pulley again and into here, and we'll be well on our way to almost done. Alright, so I've threaded my throttle cables around and I've reassembled them back into my throttle assembly up here. We're going to go ahead and refit them into that throttle tube right there. Now my throttle tube's nice and clean now. It's had a little bit of time to dry. Look how much better that inside is. With all that done, look at that. There is no play in that throttle. Immediate take up. Now, the pull cable is a little bit loose, which is why it's not snapping back. But once we take the slack out of that pull cable, it will pop right back into place. So that's perfect. That's beautiful. That is so much better. The old pull cable, like I said, was broken. So we're gonna go in here and we're actually gonna try and tighten this a little bit by pulling this. All right, so now it's just about adjusting these two cables. The pull cable, perfect. Actually the push cable is pretty good. I put the grips on. Unfortunately, just because I needed both hands, I couldn't do the camera. So the grips are now on, and basically all you do is you take a little bit of Windex or soapy water, something like that, and you just slide them on over. And then you let them dry. It's been overnight now, and that's nice and tight. Only thing that's moving is the throttle tube, so that's good. I went ahead and cut out a little piece for my bar end mirrors to go right there. Looks pretty good on that side. Other than that, I had to, I rechecked my throttle cables and whatnot. You just got to make sure that this little plate right here is flush mounted like it's supposed to be, and you want to make sure your cables aren't kinked. So something you want to check, and you'll see this in the manual. See, there's a little bit of slack in my throttle. Well, it's supposed to be like that. I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to tilt the bike all the way to the right. There's almost no slack in my throttle. Look how little that is. That's it. That's all the slack right there. All right. Now I'm going to tilt it all the way to the right. Look how much more slack there is now. That's because of the way the cables sit. Now, that is about as little slack you can have in your throttle, because if you tighten it too much and you come over to the side like this, the way these cables bind against your pulley over there, when you turn the steering column, it'll actually rotate your throttle a little bit and it'll bind up. You don't want that, all right? So you have to have a little bit. So that means that your cable, your throttle cable over here on this side, on this throttle pulley, is actually going to have just a tiny little bit of slack in it. Right there. You can see that just a little bit. It's mostly taut, but it's going to have a little bit of slack. You need that slack. So the important thing is that your throttle returns. See how it returns? It returns. That's your biggest thing, all right? And you don't bind up the throttle. Other than that, make sure that your hoses are routed correctly. Mine are not. Oh, actually, yeah, that is. Never mind. And ideally, you want to come through the radiator right here. I didn't. I went around because I had a little bit of extra room. These aftermarket throttle cables are a little bit long. And you come under the frame right here and over to your throttle pulley. All right. You could route them a little bit differently. The main thing is that as long as they're not binding, you do want them to go between the forks. But the biggest thing is, as long as they're not binding, it'll be good. It'll be fine. Like I said earlier, this is your fine-tune adjustment right here. And then you've got your, so this would be the fine-tune and the rough would be down by the pulley. Alrighty, thanks for watching. Have a great one.